Hello and welcome to NPC. That stands for Next Portable Console. It's a show about the games we take with us. I am one of your three hosts, Brendon Bigley. I'm also here with Federico Fetici.
Hello, hi. How are you?
Hello. I'm fantastic. Thanks for asking. It's very, very kind of you to ask. I'm also here with John Voorhees.
Hello, Brendon Bigley and Federico Fetici.
Hi.
Wow. John didn't ask me how I was.
Not
that my answer would have changed, but I just want to highlight right at the top.
John, come on.
I'm
one
sorry,
person did,
I
one
asked
person
you-
didn't.
I asked you before we started.
You
Come
asked me
on.
before we recorded. That's a great
Yeah.
point. That's a great point. I
Yeah.
can't throw you under the bus. All right. Anyway,
I mean,
welcome to the show.
Welcome. And you said it's about the games we take with us. If we have a few minutes toward the end of the show, I would like to make a case for how difficult it can be to take this thing with you. But hey, we can talk about that later. That's a 13-inch iPad Pro with a controller. You can take it with you. I just need a couple of minutes.
You
It's a
can
quick
take
update.
anything with you if you really try. Anything can
Look.
be your next portable console if
Look,
you
if
can
you-
affix wheels to it.
Exactly. You can take a Mac Mini with you. You can take a Mac Studio with you. You can take a gaming PC with you.
Put a PS5 on your back.
Portability is a spectrum, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Anyway.
Portable generator. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to make things work. Can we talk about the Nintendo Switch 2?
Yes, please.
Yes.
I'm
So-
obsessed with this.
Me too. So out of the blue, a couple of days ago when we're recording this, Nintendo dropped version, what is it, 22?
22, yeah.
Of the Nintendo Switch 2 software operating system. And among various bug fixes for game chat, your friends list, you can now make a note about your friends. You can have a little memo for each of your friends. But they also added this new toggle that is tucked away in the beautifully named Nintendo Switch software handling.
It's like all the way to the
section.
bottom. You
All
gotta
the
go
way,
down.
almost right before like the regulatory information in settings. There's a Nintendo Switch
How to recycle
software.
your Nintendo Switch 2, and then under that is this. Yeah.
So you can go in there and you can enable this new Handheld mode boost, which basically applies to Nintendo Switch 1 software titles that you will obviously play in compatibility mode on your Nintendo Switch 2. And what it will do is in handheld mode, so you're playing those games on your Switch 2 in handheld, but instead of running those games at the Switch 1 handheld resolution, they will run at the Nintendo Switch 1 docked TV mode resolution.
Right.
Which means that instead of running at 720p or worse, which was the case for most games on the Nintendo Switch 1 were running at like 720 was an exception. Most of them were running
dynamic
like,
resolutions and dynamic frame rates. Really, just very infrequently actually running at the full 720p.
very infrequently, and many games running at like 540p or something like that.
Yeah.
But now they will run at 1080p or worse, which means on average, doing some research, that you should get an upgrade. Even the worst game may go from 540p to 800p or 860p, something like that. And plenty of games will actually run at 1080p because a lot of Switch 1 games were actually hitting 1080p in TV mode when docked.
Right.
I am, like Brendon, obsessed with this feature.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you guys, but I've been doing some research and I've re-downloaded some games. I have purchased some games that I did not own on the Switch 1 before
Oh, interesting.
to try them again. So something that I did, I started playing again Astral Chain, which I guess I played in 2019, kind of forgot about. I
Dude.
cannot believe that it's been, almost 7 years.
Wow.
Doesn't Astral Chain really feel like one of those games that in 10 years somebody's going to be like one of the best hidden gems on the Nintendo Switch? Like it really just feels primed for that. It's great video game.
Great game, and it kind of looked terrible on the Switch 1 in
it looks really
handheld
bad.
mode.
Yeah.
It was really bad. Now,
Yeah.
I am not saying that it looks beautiful on the Switch 2, but my God, is it better with this boost mode? And I don't know what you guys have tried, but my impression is that everything is a bit less blurry. Anti-aliasing, like you don't notice a lot of those jagged edges on everything, basically.
Yeah.
And it's just a little bit, not a little bit, it's more pleasant to look at when you enable the boost mode. Have you guys tried this?
I have.
Yeah.
You know what I'm obsessed with, Federico, is the
Okay.
question the question, why wasn't this in the original release of the Switch 2? Because this sells Nintendo Switch 2s.
Yeah.
I think it's such a clever way to continuously tap into the Switch One software library.
Yeah.
Right. Which is like, I don't even know how many thousands of games are available for the Switch One. But the idea of saying, well, it's not just a compatibility thing. Now they actually look better on the Switch 2 in handheld.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fantastic. And so many games that, I tried Pokemon Scarlet, and especially the DLC looks so much better on the Switch 2 in handheld. I tried Final Fantasy 12, the Zodiac Age.
Nice.
I actually have a list somewhere.
I played Pokemon's Sword, played Scarlet,
Nice.
played Scarlet a little bit, tried Metroid Dread. Those were the three main ones that I looked at, and they all looked quite a bit better, especially the Pokemon games. I mean, there was a huge difference there.
I spent some time with just like some famously bad looking games on the Switch 2. So like Persona 5 Royal in particular is like really one of that one. So it's worth mentioning the reason that games looked so bad on the Switch 2 was because, the Switch 1, as we already said, had this dynamic resolution thing, trying to bump up to a 720p display. The Switch 2 has a 1080p display in handheld mode, so you have this like dynamic resolution, sometimes running at 540p or worse, getting bumped up to 720p, and then getting bumped up again to 1080.
Right.
And so much is lost in translation there. And Persona 5 Royal, in particular, on the Switch 1 was like iffy, I would say, and on Switch 2 was like brutal. Just really did not look very good, and now looks fantastic. It's really the thing that's interesting about it is that it looks great in handheld mode, and I just actually plugged it into my TV before we started recording to see what it looked like in docked mode because I was just curious. And I actually don't really like it very much in docked mode. Like, I think if I was going to continue playing that game on Switch 2, it would only be in handheld mode just because of how good it looks there. But as soon as I plug it in and it's docked, it's like, and then blown up to a 4K screen, you kind of have the same issue you had on handheld mode initially. The other games I tried were all of the Xenoblade Chronicles games.
I was about to say, I'm assuming that Brendon tried all of the Xenoblade, and yes, you did.
Yeah,
okay.
I had to see, and same situation. I mean, they look great on handheld mode now on Switch 2, which is really nice.
I remember I played like 100 hours of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and my God, it was so bad on the in handheld mode on the Switch 1. The game, I mean, I love the game, but it looked so bad in handheld, and so I'm glad that that's better now.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. I mean, this is one of those things. I agree with you, John. There is a version of this that's like, why wasn't this available at launch? Because like, there's, we're still under a year since the release of the Switch 2. There's no way that this wasn't a planned feature from before the Switch 2 was released. And I wonder, I mean, we'll never know. We'll never know the behind the scenes of why this is coming out now. But if I had to just like pick out of the blue, I would say probably, like, first of all, they needed to test and make sure that it worked with as many pieces of software as possible.
Yep.
And then also, realistically, it is, as you said, like, it's a good way to continue juicing Switch 2 sales. Like, the Switch 2 is getting more valuable over time for the people who invested in it early, but also for the people who may be on the fence still. You have games like Pokopia coming out, and now your entire Switch 1 library looks better. I think it's very interesting. I think the bigger question for me is, like, how many games from this point on how many Switch 1 games in particular from this point on do we get Switch 2 versions of? These like $5, $10, $15 Switch 2 upgrades that they've been releasing. Like, do they continue doing that, or have we reached the end of that life cycle of them trying to pitch us on upgrades for games that are already out? And now it's like, okay, just turn this mode on if you want better performance in the other stuff.
Yeah, I don't think one is a substitute for the other, unfortunately. I mean, I really hope that they continue to do the upgrades because they have been doing more than just up-resing them to 1080p. I mean,
right, some of them are content upgrades, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. There's new textures and other things going on there that really improves the gameplay on the Switch 2. So it'd be great if they could do that. I mean, I think it's worth mentioning, too, that there is a caveat to all this, which is sometimes the touchscreen features don't work when you're doing the 1080p on the handheld mode. Now, I mean, I think as a practical matter, that's not going to matter that much for that many games, but it will matter for particular titles.
Yeah, I will also say some of the other drawbacks that people talk about a lot are the battery problems that you'll run into. Like, and even when you turn the feature on, it's like this will impact your battery life. I personally, and I don't know how you guys feel about this, I'm not doing scientific testing. This is like purely anecdotal, me just playing the game. I usually play the Switch 2 in handheld mode. I'm usually not playing docked these days. I have really not run into a situation where I've been disappointed with the battery life. Like, I haven't run into a situation where I've like drained it entirely. Playing Pokopia for like hours, I'm like, and then, I go check what my battery life is at. It's still at like 50 or 30% after playing for like 2 or 3 hours. And same thing, just the other night, I was playing Persona 5 Royal. I played it for probably like 3 or 4 hours. And I mean, my battery was totally fine by the time I was like, okay, time for bed, and went to sleep, and I just plugged it in. So I personally increasingly think the battery stuff about the Switch 2 is overblown. I'm not as worried about it as I was before release, because I remember when we first got the specs and we saw how small it was, I was a little bit worried about it. But it almost feels like an Apple product in that it's like they're optimizing for that battery performance. They're making it work.
Yeah, I think in practice for a lot of people it really isn't an issue, especially like you said, if you can play for 2 to 4 hours in a game, that that's pretty typical.
It's pretty good. Unless if you're playing Cyberpunk the whole time, then you're going to run into some stuff. You're going to run into some issues. My Switch 2 sounds like it's taking off whenever I'm playing Resident Evil Requiem in handheld mode.
I was going to say, how is Resident Evil?
Yeah, but I mean, that's a game I'm playing docked anyway.
Yeah,
right.
I think a bunch of other games that I wanted to mention. Any 2D game, with pixel art style. That's the kind of game that, due to upscaling and different screen resolutions, like typically suffer the most. And I would recommend checking out again Crosscode on the Switch 2, which is an excellent Switch 1 RPG. And also like action games like Shinobi, for example. It looks so much more crisp when using handheld mode boost. And I gotta mention I mentioned Final Fantasy 12. The older like Final Fantasy 10 and 10-2 HD remakes also look a lot nicer in this mode. And I will also mention Paper Mario Thousand Year Door looks a lot more crisp. Ooh. And what else is on my list? Let's see.
Okami is supposed to be very good.
Okami looks really nice, I can confirm. And Luigi's Mansion 3 was already beautiful. Now it looks even better in handheld. So, nice. I mean, there's such a vast software library of games on the Switch 1. Yeah. These are just some on top of my list.
Yeah, I do want to reiterate about I think this is an amazing update. I'm very happy with it. And I just want to reiterate, I do think it really only truly affects your experience if you are a person who's playing a lot of games in handheld mode.
Yeah.
The docked experience is not really going to change at all. So if you're a handheld mode person, you're going to be very happy with this. And I would maybe just leave that setting on and never turn it off. I would love game-specific settings if they ever. I don't think they'll ever do that. Know, right? But I would love a little thing that let me turn it on and off for specific games.
Yeah,
I wonder why this was such a low key release. I mean, this was just kind of buried in the release notes.
I think it's because it's technical. I think it's because it's not the kind of thing that I'm trying to. I was thinking about this the other day. I'm trying to imagine them announcing this in a Nintendo Direct, and
there's no way.
I can't see the path to them making this work.
Nintendo hates technical things perhaps even more than Apple does.
Yeah.
I mean. And obviously, it took off immediately on social media, on Reddit. Like, it's a rare example of a Nintendo software update that everybody pretty much agrees this is incredible. So, good job. I wanted to quickly mention, I showed at the beginning of the episode my iPad Pro with this ridiculous controller. So just a quick update. I've been playing more games on my gaming PC now. Mentioned Resident Evil Requiem last week. I will, despite the reviews, I think I will check out Crimson Desert. Just to see.
Okay, I'm excited to hear how you feel about it.
I mean, despite the very mixed reviews that pretty much agree that there's no story and it's like a pretty bland mix of different genres.
Yeah,
but it does look beautiful. It does look beautiful.
It does.
I will treat myself to visual eye candy on my 5090, but in general, I wanted to optimize my gaming PC streaming setup. And I previously wrote about streaming with the iPad Pro on Mac Stories, I think on the club, 2 years ago in 2024. And I obviously ever since there's an M5, I have an iPad Pro now, 13-inch display, and I kind of wanted to pick it up again. So I did a couple of things. This did not exist at the time. This is the Razer Kishi V3 XL controller. It's
Oh,
one
yeah.
of the only controllers that is USB-C and large enough to fit a 13-inch iPad Pro. I mean, this is when it's closed. And this is when
it's a big
open.
controller.
It's
Oh
a
my God.
big controller. It's got USB-C, but it fits the 13-inch iPad Pro. So I got this, really like it. It's like the smaller Kishi V3, so it's got the clicky buttons. I am no longer playing video games at night in bed, so the sound is no longer a concern for me. I do like that it has USB-C pass-through and a headphone jack.
Yeah.
So that's very nice. On the iPad side, I guess on the PC side, instead of using Sunshine, I started using Apollo. So
What do you
Apollo
think?
is this fork of Sunshine that I would say, it's basically Sunshine. It's got all the same settings, almost the same UI, just a different logo. But it has one feature that I appreciate, which is it makes it so much easier to create a virtual display on Windows when you connect from a client like an iPad, meaning that then you have an option to physically turn off your PC monitor and just see the image that you're streaming on your iPad or your Android handheld, whatever.
Nice.
This is because Sunshine can do this, but it's very convoluted and requires, tweaking configuration files, registry keys, and those kinds of things. Apollo just ships it by default with a virtual display option. It creates an additional display in Windows whenever an iPad connects. Then you just need to go into Windows settings and say, when you see this monitor, turn off monitor 1.
Oh, nice.
It always bothered me that when I was playing on my iPad, streaming on my iPad, the monitor in my office was also showing the game. It just felt useless. And so Apollo takes care of that. And for that, I like it. On the iPad, I discovered, thanks to Reddit, this alternative app to Moonlight. So there's a Moonlight app on the iPad.
Right.
Yeah.
That was last updated 2 years ago. There's this community-driven project, I want to say, that is called VoidLink. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this.
I have
It's
not.
like
I haven't.
it's like a modern Moonlight. It's on the iPhone and the iPad. And it's like Moonlight with a bunch more settings and optimized for the latest Apple OSs.
It's called Void Link Extreme.
VoidLink Extreme. I'm sorry.
Let's
It's
just make sure we get that in
$2
there.
$2 on the App Store.
Okay.
And it's got this like several quality of life features, like a sidebar that you can easily invoke anywhere. It's got support for the Apple Pencil. It's got
That's fun.
It's fun, and it even supports Apple Pencil Hover on the iPad Pro. Like, I don't know, I guess if you want to play strategy games with the Apple Pencil and stream those games, like that could be something. It's got better support for HDR. It's got more settings for like frame latency and that sort of thing. And it just felt more stable to me than Moonlight when comparing them side by side. And so I started using VoidLink. But the majority of my time this past week was spent again debugging the micro stuttering that occurs when streaming on an iPad Pro.
Yeah.
I took my previous article on Mac Stories that
You put it into Claude, didn't you?
No. I took it. I read my own article again.
Yes.
And I remembered, I guess I have changed the Wi-Fi systems over the past 2 years.
Oh, I see.
So there's this well-known bug that involves AWDL. It's Apple Wireless Direct Link technology. It's the underlying wireless protocol that controls features like AirDrop, universal control, and other like continuity, like all those Apple-y things, which means that when you're streaming wireless games on an Apple device, it's like the bandwidth feels so saturated with this continuous polling of AirDrop, continuity, universal control that introduces micro stuttering. So
This was
even
the same
though-
issue that the Vision Pro had at launch, right?
Yes,
Yes.
same issue.
Same
So
issue.
Yeah.
There was a solution that I wrote about 2 years ago, which is changing the Wi-Fi channel in your router's settings. And I did it again, and it still did not fix it. And I was banging my head like, what am I doing wrong? I changed the Wi-Fi.
That's the problem I had, is I never got rid of it. I couldn't get it. I couldn't solve it. What's the
Well,
deal?
the deal, John, is that out of desperation, I started asking the AI, like, what am I doing wrong? I did all of this and this and this. Why is the iPad Pro still stuttering? And it found a single Reddit thread from some guy that said, I did everything. And then I realized there was another thing that I had to do, because I didn't realize that I had an always-on Mac in my home now.
Oh, I have that.
I have a Mac Studio that is always on. I had to go into the Mac Studio settings, display advanced, and turn off the toggles that say automatically connect to this computer with universal control, sidecar, like all those things.
Oh,
I had to turn them all off.
It's
and
doing the
then
same polling.
It's doing the same polling on the network.
Yeah.
Then reboot the iPad, and then everything was perfect. So I've been
But now you don't
streaming.
have any of those features on your Mac.
I don't care. I just connect with Jump Desktop. I don't need to.
No,
have,
I get it.
Yeah. So that's fixed everything for me at this point. I've been playing Resident Evil. I played Dragon Quest VII. I played some Megabonk yesterday. Absolutely fantastic. So I will recommend this setup, Apollo instead of Sunshine, if you want to make sure that your PC monitor turns off. The Razer Kishi V3 XL if you want to use a 13-inch iPad Pro. Otherwise, you can use other controllers for smaller tablets. Change your Wi-Fi settings. Disable the Apple continuity features to get rid of the micro stuttering. Get a Wi-Fi 6E or Wi-Fi 7 network if possible. And Void Link instead of Moonlight if you want to have something a little bit more modern and you want to use the Apple Pencil and you want to have additional controls for HDR and color profiles and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Nice.
I like
Can I before we move on to Anbernic stuff, which I feel like we have to talk about.
Yes.
Yes.
I just want to mention, because you mentioned it, Dragon Quest XI also great in handheld boost mode on the
Yes.
Switch too. It looks ridiculously good. Anyway,
Nice.
okay, something not exciting about Anbernic and then something very exciting about Anbernic.
Yeah.
This morning we got the pricing. This morning at the time of this recording, we got pricing for the Vita and the Vita Pro. It's going to be $100 early bird pricing for the Vita and $140 early bird pricing for the Vita Pro.
Yeah.
Which I think
Okay.
it's a tough recommend. The thing that's interesting about the Vita Pro, at least, is like the chip that's in there is it's the original Vita. The RG Vita is like, it's a pretty decent chip. People liked it a couple of years ago. It was in the Retroid Pocket 3. It's like a pretty good chip. For $100, that's like not a bad device. I just think the branding is wrong, as everybody has said. If you can divorce the branding from what it actually is, I think it's like a pretty decent device. The only issue is that the Mangmi Air X is also $100. I think that because the RG Vita, you're getting 3 gigabytes of RAM and a 720p screen. The Mangmi Air X has a 1080p screen, 4 gigs of RAM, and a Snapdragon processor in there, which feels like kind of a no-brainer for exactly the same price.
Yeah, I think a lot of these devices are going to start to be tough sells because they're under a lot of pricing pressure and component pressure. That means we're going to see more and more of them deciding to go with maybe an extra generation ago's chip and maybe charging $20 or $30 more than we might have expected a year or two ago.
Yeah. I think also the Vita Pro gets a little. It's going to be $150 MSRP. So if you miss the early bird pricing, you're paying $150. I think it's hard to even sell that one in a world where the Retroid Pocket 5 is around that price and like frequently on sale, which is obviously like a significantly better handheld. It's tough. It's a tough market out there. But Anbernic is experimenting, which we always love to see.
Yes.
Anbernic has a new device. So yeah, I feel like the RG slide was kind of the beginning of weird Anbernic in a way that I was really looking forward to. And then we got a bunch of like clones of other devices, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but I was really waiting for like, are we going to get another slide? Are they going to do something even weirder? The answer is that they're doing something even weirder. They're teasing, but haven't yet announced this new device they're working on, which had a really like solid looking prototype. I'm gonna, for the people watching the video of this, I'm gonna hold up the play date, which I think is maybe a good shape comparison.
Seems like about that size, yeah.
The idea of this device is that it's essentially like a Playdate sized screen. So it's like this square device, and then there's a controller underneath it that like swivels out from the side. You know what? I'll use this as a comparison. So it like swivels out from the side and reveals a bunch of controls that you can then use to play games. So it's this like really, really compact thing that folds into like the size of kind of a Miu Flip or a 34XX SP, but then swivels out instead of like opening and closing like a clamshell.
John?
Is that the talking flower in the background?
John
Telling you
That's a preview.
that it's 6 p.m., by the way?
Yes. Well, I'll explain why it's saying 6 p.m. later.
That's very funny. Point being, with this I love that happened.
It's going to happen
Point
again,
being,
probably.
Perfect.
With this device, I have a lot of feelings about it. I think, first of all, like no-brainer instant purchase for me. It is so silly and so weird.
Yeah.
And kind of exactly what I'm always in the market for is like weird new form factors like this. The other thing that I've been thinking about a lot, I feel like it would be a great MP3 player also, because the front screen seems like it might be a touchscreen also. I don't know if that was confirmed in that video, but either way, I'm very, very, very interested in what this. Yeah, it is a touchscreen. So like if I could run an Android app on there and get like an MP3 player,
yeah, that's
or like
cool.
a
That's
music
a cool
player
idea.
on there, I think it's gonna be a sick device.
Yeah, I mean, that's the benefit of this thing is that unlike a clamshell, I mean, we love our clamshells because it protects the screen, but if you have the screen exposed, you also can do more things with it when it's in the compact mode, like use it as an MP3 player, which is a cool idea.
It kind of reminds me of do you guys remember the Motorola Flip Out? It was like it was a phone from like 15 years ago or something.
I think Nokia had something like this too. At some point.
Like a screen that sort of swivels around and reveals like physical controls underneath. Fun
The
idea.
Nokia Twist is what it was called.
Nokia Twist. Wow. Okay. I don't know. Fun idea. I'm curious to know more. I think I'm probably gonna end up getting this because like weird Anbernic is the best Anbernic in my opinion. The RG Cube, the slide, like that's the Anbernic I love, and so this one. If they call it, I don't know, the Flip or something, that's, just a slam dunk. Just call it the RG Flip, I guess.
Or the Twist. If it was the Twist, if it was the
Twist,
RG Twist, I'd be all over it. I think one of the things that really gets me about this, which I think is going to be a non-starter for a lot of people, but is a starter for me, is the fact that it doesn't have analog sticks also. Right. Like they did, like it really just is like D-pad, 4 face buttons, start select, and then 4 shoulder buttons on the top. I don't know if it has a headphone jack. That's the only thing I'm really curious about. In the video where they're like showing it off, they show that it has a touchscreen. They show that it flips open, but you can't see the top clearly, so we don't know what's going on with like the charging port, which I assume is USB-C. But is there a headphone jack up next to that? I'm very curious to find out. Yeah,
it'll be interesting. I love their little teaser videos like this where it's just like some guy picks something up off a desk in an office building somewhere in China and starts fiddling around with it, and then that's it.
Yeah. I'm so stoked for this thing. I think this is going to be just an extremely cool device.
Yeah.
Well, I think that about does it for this week. I think, John, you're going to talk about your MagMe.
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the MagMe and the NPC XL.
Whatever happened with that flower.
Yeah. We'll talk about the flower.
Oh my God.
And the best part is that this is all happening off camera. Like it's
Yes.
Insane.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll do a big reveal on XL.
All right.
John has a very loud roommate.
It's very yes, it's very loud. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us for NPC today. You can find Mr. Brendon Bigley over at wavelengths.online, Into the Aether, YouTube, and all the usual places. And Federico and I are over at macstories.net doing writing and other stuff too. So check us out there and check us out on social media where we are easy to find. Just search for our names. Talk to you later, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Everybody.